We have a very special guest today. I'm really thrilled to welcome Karen McLoughlin, and one of the leaders that I looked up to when I grew up in my career. An amazing leader and has an illustrative career that each one of us has a lot to learn from. So let me introduce our chief guest today. And I worked with Karen in Cognizant for 17 years. And she joined in 2003 and went on to become the CFO in 2012 and continued until 2020. She has overseen the company to grow from, I think when you joined, it was less than $500 million, Karen, if I
Yeah,
remember the
three,
revenue.
three,
Yeah,
yep,
300.
365 million that first year.
Right,
Yep.
right, right. So she has actually seen that company grow from the $350 million to nearly $16 billion by the time she handed it over. I'm as excited as you are, you're all, to listen to Karen. So without further ado, welcome, Karen. Thank you for your time, and welcome everybody. Over to you, Alexis.
I'm super excited about this chat today. Karen, thanks for your time. So, I've been fortunate enough to get to have many conversations with different women leaders. I'm super proud and honored to have this fireside chat with Karen today, the senior exec who, as Anmu mentioned, has done it all. So, to get started, you've had such a celebrated career. I know you were born in England and moved over to the States. And we talked about how your parents just instilled such an importance on education. I wanted to hear more about your family and the influence that they've had over your life and how this has shaped your background.
And when we came to the States, my parents knew nothing about the American education system, right? I was raised in the British education system, very much like the Indian education system, right? Very structural, hierarchical, and so forth. So my mom took to finding out all about the American education system. And, my parents firmly believed that the more letters you got after your name, the better off you were going to be. So I suspect a lot of people on this call can relate to that kind of environment. I went to boarding school and then ended up going to Wellesley College for my undergrad and Columbia for my business school. I had no desire to go into medicine because I'm absolutely terrified of needles. I did have an acumen for math, and without really having a lot of help in terms of how to think about where to go for my career, given my family history, ended up being sort of taken under my wing by a family friend who suggested I speak to someone at Price Waterhouse, and he thought that accounting would be a great career for me. And so that's how I ended up actually starting my career at Price Waterhouse down in Miami. I wanted to see a little bit of that accountability and get the sense of what's it really like to be on the other side and have to actually live this and do this. And so joined Ryder and spent 3 years there. My husband and I decided we wanted to be closer to the New York area. And so I got online. This is back in the dial-up days. Most of you on this call are probably too young to even remember dial-up. But there used to be a job site called sixfiguredjobs.com. And I was poking around the New York, New Jersey, Connecticut area and find this job at this company called Cognizant Technology Solutions. Never heard of the company, right? They were tiny. They'd just gone public. And they were looking for a vice president of financial planning and analysis. And I looked at the job description. I thought, well, if I wrote a job description for myself, that's what it would look like. But anyhow, in October of that year, joined Cognizant finally. It was about a 6-month process to get from submitting my resume to actually getting to join the company. And the rest was history. So that's how I got to there.
You also mentioned Sheryl Sandberg's book and how this has changed the way you kind of view leadership. So we've kind of gone through a little bit of the beginning, but I heard that was a pretty influential book that you mentioned.
I think the British school system, and I think I see this a lot in young women in India, or at least did. I think hopefully it's changing. We were always taught to be very respectful, very polite, right? A little bit of the don't speak unless spoken to kind of environment. And I learned over my career, and I think, obviously her book came out as I was further into my career, but it was helpful to hear that, right? That you do have to take a seat at the table, right? And you have to go into, I don't care whether you're male or female, but when you've been hired by an organization, it's because they want you to be successful, right? They want you to participate. They want you to engage. And so sometimes you have to push yourself a little bit to step out of your comfort zone and sort of grab that chair, and not sit in the back and not sit in the corner and just quietly sit there watching everybody else. Yeah. I think take chances, take risks. I think sort of even backing up before you got to where you are now at Qualitest, but I think young people coming out of school today have so many more career choices than we did, right? When I graduated from school, and it sounds like I'm 100 years old, I'm not, but it was pretty much the traditional. You went finance, you went medicine, you went law, right? Maybe engineering, right? There was fairly structured career paths. And I think now there are so many different choices for people. And I think you shouldn't be afraid to take risks. I think you shouldn't be afraid to zigzag a little bit, try new things. I think if you're in an environment where a manager or supervisor comes to you and says, I know you're doing XYZ job, but I would love for you to go try this role or this project or something, and you feel like it's out of your comfort zone, do it. Because as I was saying earlier, right, your team, your managers, your supervisors, your CEO, they want you to be successful, because if you're not successful, they're not successful, right? So it is extremely rare that somebody's going to put you in a position and let you fail, right? They're going to be there to support you, and they're going to be there to help you. You may not end up being the perfect person for that role, and that's okay. It may not go as well as you want it to go. That's fine too. But you will learn something, and they're doing it because they see something in you that they think can benefit both the company and yourself from that role. And those are often the most fulfilling experiences that you'll get, right? When you step out of your comfort zone and do something new. So I think, even though finance has been my career, I think a couple of things. I've always loved getting my hands into the operations of the business, right? I Best moments I had at Cognizant were working with our account teams, working on deals, being on sales calls with clients, right? Really helping the teams think through issues. That for me was personally the most rewarding time that I had. And when we built the FP&A team, because that's really what I was hired to do, is build out a financial planning and analysis team. And we really built that team to focus first on the business units, being there to support them with pricing and analysis and forecasting, whatever they needed, right? Less about what I would call the traditional corporate financial planning and analysis. And we were fortunate, right? The company was doing so well financially. We were growing so fast that a lot of the things that bigger companies that ultimately we had to deal with, we didn't have to worry so much about in the early days, right? I didn't have to worry about cash flow forecasting because we were generating cash like there was no tomorrow. Our focus was really about how do we continue to scale and grow the company, and help our account teams develop into the leaders and the business people that they needed to be. And so that's really where we spent our energy.
So well established. Your career is amazing. It's just, yeah, kind of, we can all relate to feel kind of some of the confidence struggles that we have. But I do like, now that you've said that, I kind of like, hey, like stay humble. You said it 3 times. You said humble, humble, humble. So that rings in my head often. So now you're on several boards and you're playing advisory roles. So what are some of the like truly kind of, if you were to pick out maybe 1 or 2 life-changing moments that made you the leader you are today? Are there specific, I know you've mentioned kind of like specific people and what they've said and kind of how you've surrounded yourself with smart people, but I was wondering if there were like a few kind of life-changing moments that you wanted to.
You said that in terms of how I managed my team, I gave my people enough rope to try new things and not enough to hang themselves. And I thought that was a great way to live, right? And so going back to kind of some of the comments we had at the early part of the conversation about taking risks and putting people in places where they can try new things, but not letting them fail. That for me really helped me think about what I wanted to be as a leader. and how I wanted to work with people.
If we were to take away kind of just one or two things from this call, is there anything else you wanted to say? For me, I know it's like, stay humble. You lift people up, you inspire people, you continue to give back, you work hard, and I don't know, you seem to always give people credit. Like not one question I feel like has been answered without you promoting other people, even on this call. So it's inspiring. But is there anything else you want to kind of instill upon the leaders that are on this call, and then we can have everyone else chime in and ask questions?
I think have fun, be with people you like. Right? If you don't like the people you're with, if you don't enjoy the environment, leave. Right? Because it'll grind you down. Right? Work is hard, and growing a company at the pace that we're all trying to grow a lot of these companies is tough. Right? It is. And you're going to spend more time with these people than you are with your own families in most cases, right? So I think I really, for your own well-being, to make sure that you love what you do.
I'm just curious if there are any books, podcasts, resources that you would recommend for aspiring leaders.
I think the Sheryl Sandberg book, the first book, is very good. I didn't like the second book, my personal taste. One of my favorite books, though, and it depends what you're looking for, right? But one of my favorite books of all time was the Lou Gerstner Elephants Can't Dance book. It's about his transformation at IBM. And I thought that was always very interesting.
Karen, thank you so much. Always a pleasure hearing you. I had a question. You've been across many corporates, many boards. What were the characteristics that you saw in some of the leaders that made them really successful and well respected?
Yeah, I think vision, right? And particularly if you're going to be a CEO, you have to have vision. But I think most importantly is, are you a good person? Are you just, I mean, it doesn't mean you're going to be easy on everybody, right? It doesn't mean you're not going to get angry and frustrated from time to time. But are you generally a good person who believes in your team, who has empathy, who likes to be around their people, right? Engaged. I'm smiling, but I mean, he is that, I think, for the most part, that really just being a caring person. But at the same time, as a CEO, you do have to have vision and know those boundaries, but first and foremost, care about your people.
Thank you, Karen.
Hey, Karen, how are you? Thank you so much for taking the time. The question that I had is, I know my wife, she's been in the industry for 22 years, and she's about 10x smarter than I am, but I want to know what I can do as a husband to be supportive of her, right? Because there are certain things that I know women are going through as they transition through leadership positions, and there are challenges that I, as a guy, can't even imagine. But I'm trying to fix that a little bit, right? So instead of just saying, "Hey, I support you," I mean, what can I do to truly understand what she's going through?
Empty the dishwasher.
Oh no, that's dishwasher is all me. Dishwasher, clothes, garbage. That's 100% me. If that doesn't get done, she's allowed to yell at me. I'm the housekeeper.
I think it's a shared. Oh my gosh! Wow. Okay. All right. Well, maybe you need to keep the balance. No, I think that balance. But that's true. I will say, and that is wonderful that you're doing all that, because I do think I talked to a lot of women today who still feel like there is not quite the balance, right, of childcare and home care and so forth, and that makes it difficult. Like, I think just be willing to listen and support, and it's funny, and I don't know if you both work in careers where you can't, I have friends, for example, who were both lawyers, right? And they're married. In fact, Ambu knows them. One of them worked for us, and one of them worked for a law firm who did work for us, right? And so they really couldn't talk about work. And that, I think, is really challenging. In some ways good, but in some ways challenging, right? So I think if you're in an environment where you can actually share what happened in your day and just be that sounding board, my husband always did that for me. And I remember at one point somebody suggested I might have known something that I didn't know or had been involved in something. And I went home to my husband. I'm like, am I losing my mind? Like, I don't think I knew this, right? I'm like, did I ever? And my husband's like, no, I knew if that had happened, you would have come home and told me right away, right? That this XYZ thing had happened. And it was so helpful for me to be able to have that conversation,
Right.
because it was something, we will know the situation, right? That I couldn't talk to anybody else about, and it was personally really difficult. So to be able to have that relationship with your spouse and just be there as a sounding board and just to listen sometimes, right? And let people vent and or ask for opinions is, I think, super helpful. And also
Sounds
encourage her to
good.
take risks, right? If she did, if you think about Ginny Rometty, who was the IBM CEO, and regardless of
Hmm.
whether you think her tenure was good or not, she talks about the issue of when she was approached about taking the role of IBM CEO, she went home to her husband and said, I don't think I can do this. And he was like, heck no, of course you can do this, right? They wouldn't have asked you if you couldn't do this. So I think being there and providing that kind of encouragement is helpful.
Okay, good, because that's exactly what's going on right now. While she's changing her role, she got offered something that was much better, and she's struggling to say yes. Do I think I can do it? I'm like, just shut up, just do it. I know you can do it. Eyes shut. So cool. Thank you. I don't want to take
Exactly.
up any more time. I
There you go.
appreciate that.
You would have gone through so many highs and lows as well in your career. What are the things that keeps you going and bounce back?
I think just being in an environment where you're loving what you're doing and being around great people, right? So with me right now, I've got my 3 boards, um, and they're all in different stages of maturity, and they've all got different things going on. But I love being with companies that are driving for growth, right? And particularly with Agilon and Next Think, right? They're much smaller. Agilon's only not even 8 years old yet as a company. Um, Next Think's in a very high growth software mode, right? Those are fun things. I spend so much of my time these days doing more mentoring type things like these kind of conversations. A lot of the work I do with McKinsey is around CEO and CFO immersion. So first time CEOs, first time CFOs, and we'll go spend, X amount of hours or days with these folks, helping them think through what their challenges are and how to structure the early parts of their journeys. And that for me is just really fun. And I have to say, I don't miss the pressure of quarterly earnings. My companies have to deal with that. And, I deal with it indirectly through that, but not having to actually be the one managing it is I don't miss that at all. I have to say, I enjoyed it while I did it, but good to be done.
So, Karen, I'm very curious to know. See, there are many teams that will be reporting to leaders, and there should be some formula to build a winning team. Sometimes different teams might be at different maturity stages. How to build a winning team?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Sangeeta. I think you need to sort of look across and think about what are the different skills you need, and make sure that you don't have a completely homogeneous team, right? You want different skills, you want different experiences, different backgrounds, um, different levels of tenure, all those things, right? But I think you have to look at what are the needs of the organization at the time, and it's going to change, and that in some ways can be the most difficult thing, I think, as a leader, right? When you have an organization that you've built that is fit for purpose for where you are now. But then as things change, and Nambu knows this, right? Because we went through some of this at Cognizant, and I think this was probably the hardest. We were so fortunate. Most of our teams were able to really scale with the growth of the company. And that was amazing, right? To see people be actually able to go from 300 million to 17 and whatever they are now plus billion, right? Because that's not something everybody can manage. But along the way, there are those people who aren't going to be able to scale, right? And that to me was the hardest part, because you had good people who had tapped out. And those, for me, I don't know, Ambo and others on the call feel, those are really the hardest people to deal with, because you may have to make a change. And yet they're good people, they've served you well, right? But they just can't get you to the next level. And I always struggled with that. And we had a couple of those, not a lot, but we had a couple in our finance team that we had to deal with over time. But you have to, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, as an executive of the company, it's your job to make sure the company is successful. And I did always find after the fact, right? After you might have to manage someone either into a different role or manage them out, usually they ended up in a better place, because ultimately they probably weren't that happy either, right? Knowing that maybe they weren't doing as well as they used to or were able to. But that was hard.
So one of the key things that I picked up throughout the conversation was this ownership mindset that you spoke about, that people had, then they go on to become CFOs, as well as this interlude that plays into, say, people were fearless, that you can substitute one person with another. They were fearless to go in front of clients. Curious about how to build that as we are building a company to become the next $1 billion, $2 billion company ourselves. How do you build a culture of fearlessness and ownership mindset within the team? Any inputs for us, Karen?
That's a great question. Boy, I don't know that I have an easy answer. I think one is just engaging, right? It's a bit tricky when you're going to client meetings, right? Because on the one hand, I came from a background that said, if you're going on a client call as a team, right, everybody should have a speaking role. And there's some truth to that, particularly at the senior levels. The flip side is you need to bring your junior folks along, right, so they get that exposure. So try to figure out how to balance that, so that people get used to being in front of outsiders and other people, and being in environments where you sort of have to act on the fly sometimes, right, and pivot and do all those things that happen in client meetings. That we've all seen client meetings go 180 degrees different than what you expected when you walked in the room, right? I also think, Sridhar, one of the things that we were able to do, I think very well at Cognizant, was even though our corporate functions all reported up to the corporate heads, right? So HR, finance, whatever it was, right? But our teams were also really embedded in the business teams, and we always felt like we were sort of together. So our FP&A team, for example, was very aligned to the business teams, as I said, and so they were very intimately involved in pricing and all these other things. And most of my FP&A team could talk as articulately about structuring a team for a project, right, as our project managers could. And so we created that environment where everybody was articulate about the business. And it takes work. It takes lots of town hall meetings, lots of business meetings, right? But I think the more inclusive you can be if you're having, if one of your practices or regions, or I'm not quite sure how you're structured, right, is having a business meeting, and involve your other folks, right? Make it very cross-functional, make it very collaborative. And that way everybody learns about the business and can be more articulate and be able to go out and speak on behalf of the organization.
I've always believed that the best leadership traits are learned by being inspired by great leaders. And I think today was one of those inspiring sessions for all of us. Thankfully, you gave us much relief that you said you didn't plan for your career. So there's much hope for some of us. But then what is wonderful was that you ensured your personality and traits fit right well in the right job. And then you about creating your own JD made a lot of interesting insights for us. Everything that you spoke today is a valuable trait, and it went on to be a tried and tested mantra for success, Karen. Karen, we can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for making this session an amazing session.